Hello. Welcome to a new episode of Witchy Business. This week is going to be an update episode of where we're at, what's going on, how we're navigating whatever we're both going through. There was a lot of resistance on both of our behalves to resist this. We're just not really... As I eloquently put it, I'm feeling grrr. And Em just said no.
I said yesterday was like, woo, and today is just no.
So from the very start, we said we would specifically share this because we feel that that's what's missing. People don't talk about it when they're in the thick of it or when it's, not settled. So we've got no idea how this is going. And in all transparency, we don't even know if we're gonna publish this episode. We've just said, let's record, see where we're going, and we'll see if we use it or not. So yeah.
Yeah.
This is us this week. Great chat.
Where do we start? Yeah, I think what you just said there about, it's we want to share as we're going through it because not that many people talk about it, and the reality of being a business owner is that, and just kind of at the beginning of your journey, is that you have to show up. You have to show up for yourself, show up for your business, and do the things that are going to keep moving you forwards. And I say that and I mean it with love. Like, it's, you can still do it in a way that feels good, but also what about those periods of time when weeks go by and you just don't feel good? Like, that's a week or two out of your month. And so yeah, these are the kind of struggles, shall we say, that we have to navigate. And it is good to reflect on that. I think.
And personally, I feel like it's even bigger than just it's just being human. Like, is there ever a time where it's easier and it flows more up?
Yeah, I mean, because when I said business owner as well, I can just speak from my personal point of view, but yes, I agree, it applies to everyone. And I think it applies to everyone who is a conscious human being. They want to, they want to be conscious, because my experience of working full time was ignore these down days, ignore these, just bypass everything and just carry on. Let's just show up to work, hustle. And I wonder, if I was to go back to full-time work now, what would that look like? You're shaking your head. Yes, absolutely, I do not want to do that. But if I was, how would that look? How are you able to kind of roll with the humanness of life, right?
Yeah. Well, to answer that, like, I know it wasn't a question, but because I went from working full-time and then I had 2 years where I was self-employed and I was running workshops and teaching yoga and teaching marketing and stuff, and then I went back to full-time work, and I tried to bring that consciousness in it. And a big thing that I'm really passionate about is, how do we bring in like mindfulness and awareness, self-awareness and all of that into our corporate environments and into our workspaces. And just when you were talking then, I was like, I almost felt, was it easier because there was the structure of work that I didn't? It's like I could fall into the automation that work like created for me. I'm not saying that it was healthy, because it absolutely wasn't, but there was times where it was like, well, at least that's one less thing to think about because it's already thought about for me. I just have to show up and do my job, and I can almost be on autopilot, even if it's super stressful and there's all these things to do. Whereas now it's sometimes I can get caught in this because I so want to be conscious of the space that I come from when I'm creating something or holding space for someone. Then I'm like, well, if my space is not perfect, you know, if I don't feel super inspired, super light, super full of love, and I can fall into the love and light, you know, what I call like the quote unquote love and light vibe of if it's not all happy vibes, then I shouldn't be putting that energy into anything. But actually that is life. Like, it's not just love and light, and it's not always like horrible either, but it's just this big mix of everything that happens all at the same time in the one space. And it's not about waiting for the circumstances to be your version of perfect to do things. And when you don't have that external structure of work where you just go into autopilot within it, like, what does the structure look like, and what does it look like to show up in this ness? Yeah. So that's a topic for a dissertation. You've got 2 hours. Thanks for coming to the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I completely agree with everything you're saying. And I think what I want to pull from that is accountability. It's self accountability and responsibility. Like, when you are working for someone else, you do have other people to hold you accountable, whether they are, you know, actually holding you accountable, or they're just there. You don't, you know, you don't want to let them down. You don't want to let your clients down, the team down. Whereas when it's just yourself, you probably don't want to let yourself down or let anyone down, but it is much easier to let that structure go. And I say this as someone who is very structured. Like, I have always been very structured, very organized, very able to hold myself accountable. And just recently, I really have been, I don't know, I was going to say let it slip, but that's not really fair to say, I don't think. It's, I don't know, I feel also this definitely does have, I feel like this is important to bring up because it does play a part in it. But since coming off the pill, it's been 5 months now, and I have just been working with my cycles in a way that I've never done before. And I just have noticed that I don't have as much energy as I did when the pill was masking everything. And I think then there's some kind of resistance to that, and then resentment as well that comes for me as a projector as well. My not self bitterness comes up around that, around like not having as much energy on the days that I don't have as much energy. And then it's like it's a cycle. It's like, you know, I'm someone who practices and preaches slow living and anti-hustle, but then when I have a down day and I take rest because I need it, then I find myself feeling guilty sometimes. And then it's like a cycle, not all the time, you know, it is a practice, definitely. But I guess just to come back to the accountability, there's no one there telling me, apart from you, who I'll message, you know, apart from we have each other. So that honestly, that has been such an amazing, you know, I am so grateful for you, because it is like, yeah, I don't know how to say it other than like, it is lonely being an entrepreneur. And there is a lot of responsibility and accountability that comes with that, and that is a lot to carry. You know, sometimes I do find myself feeling like, oh, this would be so much easier if I had a team. But, you know, you grow to that stage and you get to that stage. It's a process. But yeah, I don't really know what the point of that was, but I just felt like it was relevant to what you just said.
I mean, I loved listening to you say it also, you know. Oh, yeah. When you said about like coming off the pill, it's true. I have seen like a change in you. There's been like, but like you see the side of, there's those moments where you have less energy, and what I've seen is a softening, which makes sense. You know, that there's less like of that masculine energy around it, and you are actually like more in tune with your cycles. But it's so difficult as well. Like it's so much unlearning, relearning, like how to be. And yeah, I don't even know if like it's related to that or anything. I'm just thinking like a couple of days ago, I woke up and I really needed to just put things down on paper, and I was journaling and realizing that I'm constantly craving stability and like an open diary, basically. And just like, there's part of me that's constantly craving looking at my diary and having nothing planned for the next 2 months. And I mean, even like on weekends or anything like that. And realizing that I've never had that in my life since I was 3. And this might sound really extreme, but my parents divorced when I was 3. And every school holiday, I was on a plane to go see my dad. And that was every 6 weeks. And that was my whole life until I was 18. And then it was uni, you know, which are like those 13. I was really like putting this down, and uni's like those 13-week cycles broken into 2, and you've got your exams and stuff, which happens every 6 weeks. And then out of uni, I got into a job where, and we've spoken about this often, that you're working on a campaign that's happening in 6 months while working on the one that's happening in a year, while being in the one that's already happening. And then I had partners who, like, I twice, 3 times, I had relationships where they were away, so I had to travel or they would come back. And so my life had this rhythm of like, and then it was like, oh well, we'll be going away, we'll be coming back, like, and it's just crazy because I've just realized I've still not had like a time where for 6 weeks there's nothing that's happening. And I think I'm just coming to terms with the fact that maybe it never will. In a beautiful, like, you know, it's not like a complaining thing, because what's happening in 6 weeks is my parents are arriving from Australia and I haven't seen them in a year. And then I've got my mom and my sister, you know, and before that I've got like my oldest childhood friend who's coming with her daughter, and like, so it's all like amazing things. But it is like, I always feel like I've got a deadline of like, oh, you've got 3 weeks where you can focus on something, but then something else is going to happen and that's going to break like the flow. And there's a bit of like frustration that's there with that. There's like a leave me alone kind of energy, but that's also not really what I want. So again, just like you just said, I've got no idea why. I'm just putting that there, kind of voicing it, so it's just out there of, yeah, this thing that I really crave is like a big wide open diary and nothing there. But then what I know and what my comfort zone is to always have things planned. And so even subconsciously, I'll make that happen, and I'll put myself in situations where that then becomes the case. So I don't know, maybe that's something for me to think about, that like maybe after, we haven't even started summer, but I already know I've got pretty much like family popping in and out until the end of August, and just thinking, I'm laughing because I just said August and I'm like, oh, first week of September I'm away for my mum's birthday. And then there's plans for you to come to Nice in September. And I'm like, okay, August, like maybe October onwards, I just need to have nothing planned. And as I'm saying this, I'm like, yeah, there's Christmas in there. That's not gonna happen. And we're in next year. So how about I just learn to function and to stop trying to make this like open calendar thing happen, and just allow myself to, yeah, just work and create in little bits within that, instead of kind of waiting until there's more time and more space for things to flow into.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like time for me to train myself to do like the little 30 minutes and hour spurts here and there, and see what can come out of that too.
Yeah. Or like, what is it about, huge amounts of time and space that you are craving, and how can you create that in a shorter time period, or how can you create that in a different way within your business? Because I feel the same. I like every year I enter the year saying, I'm not going to book out my diary this year. I'm just going to leave a certain amount of weekends just for me. And every time it's just not possible. Like, of course it's possible. Anything's possible, but it just doesn't happen. It's like now, when people are like, when are you free? I'm like, September, October, like genuinely, like don't have a spare weekend until then. Like, and it becomes like quite stressful, but I like don't and it's funny, and it's like, I know it's like a nice problem to have though, isn't it? That we have plans and that we have amazing friends and family to spend time with.
Yeah.
To go back to the question, how can you or I or anyone else listening who resonates with this create that time and space and work with what they have?
Yeah, I'm almost like, I know that, like, part of me feels like going, you know what, because you asked first, like, what do you think you'll gain from like that time and space? And I'm like, honestly, I don't know, because I've never lived it. Like, I'm 33, I was 3 years old when this started. It's never happened. I almost feel like there's just like a fantasy land that I'm like, oh, all of this thing is possible when and if that is there. And it's just like, no, just all of what I want is possible exactly where I am right now. And it's, instead of putting all this like time and energy trying to create something, like the time, the space, changing my routine, doing all, like managing time, which is not possible, how about I just like use my time and energy just to create what I want to create, and learn to be in the non-managed time, because managing our time is like a huge farce. Like, it's one of those great things that the quote unquote well-being space has tried to make us believe is possible. But like, I honestly believe that time is absolutely not linear. Otherwise, we wouldn't have those moments where you feel like a week has lasted a month, or those moments where a month feels like it's passed by in an instant. You wouldn't have those conversations that last for 3 hours and you feel like you sat down 15 minutes ago if time was so linear. And I really don't believe you can manage time. Like, I think we've both tried that a lot. Like, we were both project managers. If that's not time management, I don't know what is. Like, we've literally had jobs that were around managing time. I never managed it. There was always that last minute thing that happens, and no matter how well your project tracks the whole way, never had one that just happened without something that made it feel like suddenly there was not enough time. And so, yeah, I just want to stop trying to figure out how to have those big expansive times and spaces, and just do with what's there. Because I feel like that resistance hasn't really brought me very far. So I wouldn't say nowhere, but now, like, just talking about it, I'm like, oh, I'm excited to see actually what's possible when I'm not using my energy to resist what I don't have, and when I just allow myself to flow within what is there.
Yeah, it's almost like you were using it as an excuse. Oh, well,
Yeah.
I'll do all these things when I have all this time.
Yeah. And when situations are perfect, and that becomes procrastination. But like I was just telling you, I mean, I live alone. I don't have a partner, don't have kids. Like, what else do I have to do but to look after myself, And I've got, like, my aunt was just here, so I've got 5 loads of laundry to do, and I feel like I need a free day in my diary just to clean my floors, rearrange a couple of things, and do some laundry. Like, no, I used to do that with a full-time job traveling, and it's just, I feel like the more time I have, the more time I need, and the more time I want, and that's just not ever going to happen. So just use the time that I've got, which is a lot comparatively. And
I think one of the biggest, most common limiting beliefs is I don't have time.
It's got the same hours in a day as Beyonce, they say.
Let's not get started on that Molly May debate. I was just thinking, though, I think that time in general, there's 2 ways to look at it. First of all, time as in divine timing. So what you were just describing, things, this time isn't, there's no time. Divine timing is things happen in their own time. And so that's why things might happen quickly, or they take a long period of time, and you can never expect it. Things happen, you can't predict it. But then we do have time in the way that man has created it, the way that we measure time. Yes, it's a made up thing completely, but that is something that we do have to work with in the 3D world. So so the way I like to look at it is, you have the divine timing, and then you actually have the time that we have, today, that we are living. And that looks like us saying, let's record our podcast at 2 p.m, And so that's the time that we can try and, or maybe we find a different word for manage, but it's learn to play with, learn to work with, but also knowing that divine timing is the ultimate timing. And so we can't make things happen. We can't, and I think that's really where hustle culture comes from. It's like, I've got this amount of hours in the day, and the whole Beyonce thing, right? I've got 24 hours in a day. I can use it like this, but that's not taking into consideration someone's background, their responsibilities, their life. And Beyonce, of course, she has a whole freaking team to help her, right? So that's not very realistic. But the idea of having the same amount of hours in the day is true, in the same way that we all live on divine timing. So what's possible for you is possible for someone else. It's just that might have a slightly different timeline, and you can work with the time that you have, not the time
but
that
like,
everyone...
the time that I have, I don't actually know how much time I have, and there's those days where
What do you mean?
Well, in life in general, like we don't.
Oh, okay, now we're talking like lifespan.
We're talking
Absolutely.
like you don't know how
Absolutely.
much time
No.
you have, and like also like there's those days where in half a day you do more than you've done the week before.
Yeah.
And also, like, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing how much I measure time by how much I've done.
Yes.
And like, I'm sure I'm not the only one that it's just like, but I think what I'm really like getting to and seeing is how much I'm how much I'm not allowing myself to flow because I'm staying with it, like within when you have like this much perceived time ahead of you, then you can get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like, I'll only do this if I have, rather than you saying, oh, I've only got 5 minutes, so I can just try and do what I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A bit like, like, oh, I didn't work out on Monday, I'll start next month, that kind of vibe. Whereas it's just like, well, yeah, I didn't do that on Monday, and it's Tuesday afternoon and it's 3:30 p.m, but I could start doing something now if I wanted to.
Yeah.
I've got no one, like literally nothing, but even if I did have something in an hour, like I tend to be like, oh, I've got something in an hour, I'm not going to start anything now. Or I'll tell myself, oh, well, start something now and see how it goes. And then I'll be frustrated that I have something in an hour because, oh, well, see, this time I was in flow and now that's not going to happen again. Like there's just this, but that's all in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I actually experienced this morning because I woke up and I was feeling really sluggish, and I'm on my period, so I'm just a bit slow, a bit foggy. And I suddenly just had this thought, and I'm launching a group coaching program in 3 weeks' time. It starts in 3 weeks. And I just thought, no, I want to keep going. I want to just like put everything I have into this, right? And it was like something shifted within me, and it was in my mind. And like, usually I honor how my body is feeling, but in that moment I realized that's in my mind. My body actually feels fine. And we talked about this before, about how it's just been a full moon, so it's like you've got the energy of the full moon, but then if you happen to be like on your period around that time, it's really interesting to see how that plays out versus it being like a different time in the moon cycle. But anyway, the point is, I really experienced this feeling of like how I can support myself. That's what it felt like. It felt like I was saying, yes, I am just gonna do all the things today, not in I don't mean that in a hustle way, obviously. But well, not obviously, but to us maybe it is, because we try and resist the hustle as much as
Yeah.
we can. And I was able to do all the things on my to-do list in a couple of hours this morning, and now I can create the space for myself this afternoon. And that really felt like it was such a mindset thing, because within my body I was feeling fine. But I guess the point of that is check in with your body, how are you feeling? And then check in with your mind.
Yeah. And yeah, there's I guess that's where I was getting at with this whole like
Yeah.
time thing of just like, I'm making such a big deal about it in my head, when actually, well, if this is my reality, then just like, stop resisting it, and stop like trying to make this fantasy land happen,
Yeah.
and
I
just
read I read somewhere recently that you know what you just said about, oh, I've missed the gym this Monday, I'll
yeah
go next Monday.
yeah
So it's kind of like an all or nothing approach. It's
yeah
like, oh, I'm only going to do this thing because I have a whole week spare to do it, versus
yes
like I've got half a day, I'm going to do it. So that's like an all or nothing approach, which is perfectionism, a form of
Mm.
perfectionism. And I find that so interesting, because perfectionism is also wrapped up in hustle. Like
Yeah,
perfectionism really ties into hustle culture. So it's like this idea that, we'll only do this when we feel 100% ready, or when we have got everything's like laid out into
yeah.
place. And so, yeah, just thought that was an interesting thing to bring to the
Mm.
table.
Say it with confidence. Yes, that was an interesting thing to bring to the table.
I'm also, being able to track your cycles is so helpful, because I can look at my app and be like, today's an anxious day. And so, say
Yeah.
it with confidence. Well, I'm on
Well,
day 3. I'm not feeling that confident today.
yeah, I mean, we say this all the time, it's such a ride, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because within all of this,
Mm.
I still have like, I really need to get like not a whiteboard, but something to write notes while I'm in the shower, or a
Yes.
Bruce voice recorder or something, because that's when I've got all my like ideas and downloads and stuff. But within all of this, there's also the moments of clarity of like, oh, when I do this, like that's what I'll talk about, and this is what I want to do, and then I get annoyed with myself because I don't act upon them, because I think like, oh well, you said you'd do it tomorrow, so don't do it today. And yeah, I think I'm just getting a little bit annoyed with myself. But also like my aunt had an operation, and I was looking after her, and I have just got my flat back after 2 months of sharing a small studio apartment. So but again, that's my life, and I just need to learn to flow with that, because something tells me it's kind of always going to be that way. And that's the beauty of it. Like, it means it's alive. Like, to me, that's aliveness as well. And I think we culturally, as societies in general, like especially like Western world, have become very isolated, and I need to put myself first and have, but it's not really how I grew up. Like, growing up on an island, it was really different. You had like people popping in and out all the time, and I really enjoyed that, and I love that community feeling, and I want to be available to look after my aunt who's lending me her flat for 2 months, and I want to be available when my parents decide to come to Europe for for 3 months because they're finally retired and they haven't been
Yeah.
over in quite a long time. And, you know, like, yeah, it's, to me, that's all of life. And I want to be available for life. And life isn't perfectly structured.
No.
So,
Yeah. And when people say running a business is not for the faint-hearted, it really is not. And I do have moments of just feeling extremely proud of myself, and so should you and anyone else who is on this journey, you know, for just even where you are right now and how far you've come, because it is a ride. and really where we are right now is, all of us, is exactly where we are supposed to be. And
yeah,
whenever you like, both of us have had these, and I say this because I was just I just suddenly had a thought. It's like, whenever we talk in this way, sometimes, because I can kind of, there's, you know, we're in a phase of feeling frustrated, like you just said, frustrated or bitter, or are not self themes, frustrated and bitter, but also, yeah, and all of those kind of emotions that come with that. But there's no part of me, and I'm sure for you, that wants to go back
no,
to where we were,
no,
or full-time work. And this is really the spiritual journey as well. It's like, the further you go, the harder it is to go back, even though sometimes you want to, because it is hard. And doesn't that look nice and cozy back where
it
I
was
was?
so cozy when we could just like spiritually bypass ourselves from everything, you know. And it's
Yeah.
much cozier for me to tell myself, oh well, wait until everything feels perfect before you create something. But that's bypassing, and like, by, you know, spiritually bypassing or just like mentally bypassing something, ultimately, like on the grand scheme of things, what you're bypassing is life in overall. And I don't want to do that. I want to be fully present for the whole experience that life brings. And that brings very, I was going to say like polar opposite emotions, but we view them as polar opposites because we've put everything on this like linear scale, like time, emotions, like, you know, we've polarized everything as if like sadness and happiness are two opposite ends of a scale, when they actually both happen and can happen exactly at the same time. And the
Yeah,
more
the law of polarity. The
yeah,
law of polarity states that when there's always an opposite, so when one exists, there's
there's
the
the
other.
other, and they're two faces of the same coin. And it's, the more you make space for one, well, surprise, surprise, there's going to be more of the other as well. And so if you're resisting like the uncomfortable stuff, you're giving less space for everything else as well. And that's something
Yeah.
that I constantly tell myself. And, you know, I was sharing with you, like, so I'm currently waiting for like the final okay and the signature on a contract for a really exciting project for me, with coaching, which would like bring it in a completely different way to new people. And but with that comes terms and conditions that I have to show up in, you know, London or different European locations 4 times a year. That's it. That's 4 times. Where does my mind go? Oh, well, I'm never going to be able to leave Europe, or I can't have this opportunity and leave Europe. Girl, you've been talking about leaving Europe for 3 years, and where are you in Europe? So shut up, just live here, do this thing, you know, like,
Yeah.
my mind's automatically like, oh, but that means like, if I feel like I need to move back to home, or like the Pacific, let's just say, because I haven't ever defined where home exactly is over there,
Yeah.
then I won't be able to do that. Well, you can start a contract, you can end a contract. And also, yeah, I've been thinking that I'm going to be moving back there for the past 3 years and I'm still here. because I haven't felt like anything's called me back there. So, you know, it's just like those little like traps of the mind. And
yeah, trying to like plan everything out, whereas you can't. And like you said, you start the contract, you see what happens. Nothing is permanent. It just isn't, or nothing is certain.
No, and everything that I had planned out in my life up until now, hasn't happened, you know. Like the grand scheme of things is kind of there, but I thought I'd be a mum by now. That's like the biggest one that I can think of. I was certain I would never live in France. Yep. And here I am. Those are the two big ones I can think of, but there's been many, you know, but I've also lived so much more life experiences that I could have never thought about or dreamt of, you know. So
and that's what happens when you open yourself up and you allow yourself to experience life.
All of it. Well, I didn't expect all of that to come.
But also I just want to say something that we just talked about before we started recording, but we saw Kirsty Gallagher's post, because we love her posts, and we talked about it in the Moon Notes episode. But today, as we are recording this, the 11th of April, it is supposed to be one of the luckiest days, and and we both saw it and we were like, oh, that sounds great, but then immediately jumped into I don't feel very lucky today, or I don't feel in the mood for it today. And I guess
this is how I feel on my luckiest day.
And I just really, it was funny that we both felt like that, because I see these posts a lot on TikTok as well, because there's a lot of people that I follow that say like, today is the best day to manifest. And it really just ties into what we were saying about, first of all, the law of polarity, second of all, being human. And whilst we can be feeling maybe not lucky, we feel like we're missing an opportunity by not feeling lucky today. It doesn't matter, because divine timing is here. And so it is a lucky day. We are lucky just to be alive today. We're lucky to wake up every single day as we are, you know, and so that is a blessing. And so it's okay not to feel super lucky and happy and positive and love and light, because the universe is always working for us, right? So a reminder for both of us and anyone who is listening.
Thank you for sharing that.
Anything else?
No, I feel like like the energy's just dropped, in a sense, like it feels calmer. I guess we just both had quite a bit to get off our chest and to vocalize, and thanks for listening. I'd love to hear what resonated, if anything, and
and we'd love if you have any topics or anything that's been on your mind recently and you'd love us to speak to that, please let us know, because we would love to talk about that and
give us ideas of things to talk about. You would like us to cool. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.